Hello and welcome to part 8 of creating a simple move and dodge game using the Godot game engine. In this mini-series, we're creating this simple move and dodge game. It's a game where you're a ball and you move around a 3D maze by rolling the ball around with arrow keys or WASD keys on your keyboard. You collect coins, you avoid enemies. If you collect all the coins, you win the game, and if you hit an enemy, you go to the game over screen. If you have not seen the first 7 videos in this series, I'll put a link to my playlist, this playlist on the screen right now. But in this video, we're going to be adding coins and coin counting into our game. We are going to, number 1, create a coin scene based on a model that we're taking from Blender 2.8 and we're exporting it into Godot using a GLTF file. You've seen this many times in this mini-series so far. Next up, we're going to create a heads-up display, or a HUD, that keeps track of our coins. In other words, one of those little coin counters at the top right of the screen that has a little number on it, and it'll count up every time we collect a coin. Next up, we're going to make the coin spin, and we're also going to make it delete itself when it detects a collision with Steve, our main ball character in our game. And next, we're actually going to make our counter be able to count up. So at first, we're going to create it just a static version of the heads-up display. Then we're going to program it to be able to count up. And number 5, what would be a coin without it actually reacting to being collected? So we're going to animate the coin bouncing up and then falling back down again, just like any game that you might have seen in the past when the coin is collected. And number 6, finally, we're going to very quickly make a you win screen, and we're going to make it so that when you collect a certain number of coins, however many you have in your level, and we'll duplicate those, you win the game. But of course, if you like this video or if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps me and my channel out. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see more videos like this one in Godot or Blender or technology, click on that subscribe button and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. So let's go ahead and jump into Godot. In the last video, we made a game over screen along with our level and our menu, because in our level we now have enemies. And if I go ahead and play just this one scene, you can see that my enemies, I actually haven't created more of them since the last video, but my enemies do move around the level. I think I have to make my second enemy actually roll, because that's where I got to in the last video. It doesn't actually roll right now, it just slides. But if I accidentally collide with an enemy, I go to the game over screen and I can go back to the menu and of course play again. So let's get off right into Blender then and export our coin model. Of course, I'm giving you in the description area of this video a link so you can download this Blender 2.8 Blender file of a coin, and this is my coin. It has a little crescent moon on it. It's got a reflective material. If I select the coin and then go to the materials tab, I've got the material already named material-coin, and I've got the roughness turned down on the coin so it is reflective. So now with the coin selected, I think this file actually does not have a camera or a lamp in the scene, but I'll select it anyways. I go up to File and Export and GLTF2. You've seen this many times before in this series, so I'm going to go through it quite quickly. And on my desktop, I'm going to go into my Godot basic move and dodge game folder and go into imports, where all my other GLTF files are. And down on the bottom left, I'm going to change my format to GLTF embedded. So not a binary file, but an embedded, and we're going to use selected objects even though this file only has one object, the coin. Okay, no camera or lamp. So I'll go to export GLTF on the top right and click on it, and it'll take a sec to export into my project folder. I also have another download for you that we're going to use in a few minutes. I've got an image of the coin, and that's for our heads up display on the top right of the screen in our game. So it's just a rendered out PNG image file of the coin. These checkerboards are transparent, so right away I'm going to right click on that file and say copy, and then I'm going to go into my project folder and I'm going to make a new folder called images or sprites. I'm going to call it sprites, and I'll go into that folder and I'll right click and paste. So now I've got that in my project folder and we can get into Godot. It did some importing And so hopefully everything is there. In my imports folder, I've got coin.gltf. I'm going to double click on that. And I'm going to say open anyways, not the default new inherited, but open anyway. And there is my tiny little coin. And so I'm going to save this scene right away as a Godot scene. So scene, save scene as, not just save scene. And I'm going to go up out of my imports folder. I'm going to press the up arrow and then go into where is it? Assets, I think that's what I called it. And this is where my scenes for my objects are going to be. So I've got enemy. This scene is called coin though. I'll click on save. So now that it's a saved native Godot scene, I can edit it. Okay, this scene root of my scene should be an area. A coin is not going to be a physics object. It's just going to have an area that we can detect if something like a physics body comes into it. So I'm going to right click on our scene root and say change type right there. And I'm going to change the type to under spatial and under collision object, but not under physics body area. Okay, and I'll click on change. And so now my scene root is an area and it has a coin. And I might call this coin mesh. And I'm going to call my actual root node coin. There we go. This coin has an error because it needs to have a collision shape in order to know what size of object it is. So right away, I'm going to select my coin, the root node, and press the plus. And I'm going to add I'll just search for it, collision shape. The pink one, not the 2D one, of course. So double click on collision shape. And the collision shape needs to know what shape it is over on the right hand side. With it selected, I can go and make it have a cylinder shape. And the cylinder is not rotated correctly, and it's way too big. So right away with my collision shape selected, I'm going to go to transform, and we're going to rotate it on the X, the red axis, this one here. So I'm going to say rotation on the X 90. And now I can go to my orthogonal view and my front view, and if I zoom in on it, I can drag the little handle, and I'm going to make the coin, I'm just going to eyeball it here, right about its exact size as best as I can. And then from another angle, I'm going to make it smaller. And if you want to change the size of the collision shape to make it easier to collect the coin, you can. That's totally up to you. I might just leave it like that so it's a little bit easier to collect them. Okay. I think we're pretty much good. Let's go ahead and save the scene. Control S. And I'm going to go to my level, and I'm going to select my root node because that's where we're going to add not the coin necessarily, but we're going to add a folder for coins. And to do that, I'm just going to select my root node and press the plus. I'm just going to add another, I'll clear my search out, a spatial node. And essentially, if you have a bunch of coins all lined up here, why not have them in basically a folder or a group? And so we can use a spatial as that. So I'm going to double click on spatial, and now I've got a spatial as a child of my spatial. That's a level, or named level. So this spatial, I'll double click on it. I'm going to rename it coins, and now I can create an instance of my coin. So I'm going to have coin selected and press the little link button, and I'm going to select assets coin.tscn and press open. And my coin is now hidden down below the ball. So I'm going to move it up and move it over. And it's okay if it's floating above the ground. That's actually kind of what I want. And so now I might move it somewhere in my game where it's very easy for me to test out. I might move it, I don't know, up there, okay? And I'm just going to do a quick test of this. So I'm going to test this scene out with the little play scene button. And if it works correctly, I can see it. And I should not be able to do anything to it. I should just go straight through it with my character. Okay, so here we are. And there's my enemy. I don't want to hit the enemy, but if I go through the coin, nothing happens right now. So we'll deal with that in a few moments, but let's go ahead now and make a coin counter heads up display. How do we do that in a 3D level? Well, it's really easy. you just have to add a 2D node, in other words, a control node into your game. And if it's a 3D scene, it'll have a 2D scene floating on top of it. It's really just that easy. So if I select my level, the root node of this 3D scene, and I press plus, and I double click on control, or select control and press create, I get jumped over into my 2D workspace mode. And I've got this new heads-up display that I can work with. This is a control node, this thing that I'm dragging right now. And I'm going to make it the size of my game screen, which is hard-coded to, under the rectangle property of itself, to 1280 wide. That's pixels by 720 pixels tall. So now in this control, I can add a few things up in the top right corner. I'm going to add that picture of the coin. I'm going to add a label with a letter that has a little X for times. And I'm going to add a bigger label that has a number in it. In fact, we're just going to give it a dummy character so that we know that we are changing it programmatically in our game. So really quick, with our control node selected, I'm going to press the plus. I'm going to add under control. We haven't seen this kind of node before. It's going to be a sprite node. Is it under control or is it under node 2D? It is called a sprite. You know what? I haven't used it in a while, so I'm just going to search for sprite, and it's a blue one this time. It's called sprite. There it is. I'll double click, and with sprite selected, I'm going to go over and give it a texture, and that texture is just my image file. So under my sprites folder, in my project folder, I can just drag this HUD underscore coin across with my sprite selected. I can drag it across, there it is, to the texture and let go. And now my sprite's in my game. And I can drag my sprite around, that's totally okay. I can drag the corner, and if I hold shift, I can scale it proportionally. So let's make it about that size, and I can just move it by dragging it to where I want it to be. That looks pretty good to me. I'm gonna, to my control node, I'm gonna add a little label for an X. So really quickly, with control selected, I'll press plus. I'm gonna search for label and double click. This label again is just going to be, I'll drag it and put it right there. It's gonna have a little lowercase x, and I'm gonna give it a custom font. And really quick, I'll check font, create a new dynamic font, go into it by clicking on it, and go into font. And now I can drag a font over. Let's try sometime later. And let's make the setting of the font bigger. Let's try 35, and maybe like a bit bigger than that, maybe 56, something like that. And you know what? I don't quite like that font. So I'm going to change it to that no-go font, casual or red cost comic. I like that one. And maybe I can make it a little bit smaller, maybe 45, and or maybe even 40. And I'm going to change the color of it. So under custom colors, I can change the font color, and I'm just going to pick a yellowy gold color, kind of like that to match. And I'm going to make this smaller. And so that's my little X. Times. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more gold, but let's not be too picky for the sake of this video. Okay, one more time, I'm going to create a label. So I'm going to select my control node, press the plus, we'll add a label, and I'm going to make this font a little bit bigger, but this is going to be the one that's actually going to be programmed to count up. So in my label, I'm going to put the letter Q. In fact, I'm going to make it a capital. Why am I using Q? Because I want to have Q in my editor, but as soon as I launch this scene, which is actually a 3D scene with the control over top of it, I want it to not display Q. I want it to display the number that I program, 0, to be the starting value of this letter. So I'm going to go to custom fonts with this label selected and make a new dynamic font resource and click on it and go to my font, and I'm going to try sometime later. And let's make it under settings, let's make it a lot bigger. Let's make it maybe 80. And I don't like that font at all, so I'm going to play around with the other ones. Let's try just red cost comic. Yeah, that one's simple. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, even, maybe even 90. Okay, I kind of like that. Can I change my paragraph to be, in fact, it is left justified already, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to change the color, so I'm going to collapse the font, and I'll collapse custom font, and I'll go to custom color and font color, and I'll give it the same goldy color. If I click on my original X and click on its color, I can copy this hex code, which is 6 digits long. It has numbers and letters A, B, C, D, E, and F, and it defines the red, green, and blue values in my color. So I can copy it and then go back to this letter, go back to custom colors, and just paste Control V that color, and that way I can have it match. So I might have more than 10 coins in my game, so I'm going to move those things over. And let's see how this looks. I'll do a quick Control S to save, and I'll play this scene, and hopefully we'll see our HUD on top of our game. Aha, so it works. We've got the coin and a times and the letter Q. And if I move around, you know, my camera's moving, but this is staying static. I'm just going to wonder to myself here, this control is at the bottom of my tree stack, which means it's drawn last, which means it's drawn in front of everything. I wonder what happens if we drag this to the top of our tree, still a child of level. And I wonder what happens. Will it still be on top? I actually don't know the answer to that. And it is. So apparently if it's a control node in a 3D scene, it does not matter where it goes, but I'm just going to put it down at the bottom, and hopefully not a child of something wrong like I just did. I'll drag it back onto level, and there we go. Next up, let's make the coin spin, and let's make it delete itself when it detects a collision with our Steve character. So let's do a quick Control S to save, and then go back into the 3D view so we can see our scene. And my little coin is down here, but if I select it in our scene dock in our tree, so coin is right there, I'm going to have this coin have its own script. So I'm going to select it, press the little add script button. Of course, we're using the language GD script. This is code, or this object is an area, so it's going to use area's code. It's going to inherit that code. Template, I'm going to say no comments. And I need to make sure I'm saving this script file as coin.gd, but not in the assets folder. So I'll press the little folder button, and I'll go up one, and I'll go into my scripts folder, and this will be called coin.gd. So I'll press open. I don't know why it's open, but yeah, and I'll press create. Now, I can make this coin spin in a quite easy way. I'm just going to tell it always to increase its rotation on the y-axis. That means the green axis, like the handle, the hula hoop that's now white. So it looks like it's spinning. And we're not going to have to use any kind of a physics way of doing that, because this coin is an area. It's not a physics object. So what I can do is, if I go back to its script, and I'll make this code a little bit bigger, I'm going to add that same always game loop function. It's called func underscore physics process. So if I type underscore p, it'll give me that hint, and then I can press enter. This is the function that runs at 60 frames per second when your game is playing, and it'll do any instructions you put under this line, indented of course, at that same 60 frames per second. Now, we're not going to tell our coin to rotate using physics. We're just going to manipulate our area nodes properties under the inspector. So if I go to the transform properties, I can just affect its Y rotation, and you can see I'm kind of jiggling it there, and if I keep going, well, it's rotating it the right way, but I'm going to reset that back to 0. So I'm going to go back to my coins script with that little icon, and I'm going to press enter. And so we've indented once. Maybe I'll get rid of that extra empty line, and I'm going to say rotate underscore y. This is a method or a function that you can use to rotate an area on its own y-axis, or I believe it's the global y-axis. Now, this function or method does not use degrees. It uses radians. And radians aren't something that most people are familiar with until they get to about grade 10 math or so in high school. So we're going to use degrees instead. So I'm going to use a little converter function called deg to rad, and I might have used this before in a previous video, I'm not sure. Deg to rad is a little function that you can put inside of an area where it's expecting a radian, and I can put inside its round brackets a degree amount, and I'm going to try 3. So 60 times per second, it's going to rotate the coin on the y-axis by 3 degrees, and then convert that into radians, and then it'll actually do the rotation. So let's go and see if that works. I'll do a Control S to save and play this scene. And there we have it. The little coin is rotating and it looks pretty good. We want it to then disappear when it detects a collision with our good old friend Steve, which is not doing right now. One thing we don't want to do though is have the coin delete itself right away, because we're going to, in the later part of this video, add an animation of the coin kind of bouncing up and then down. That will make it seem more interactive and fun. So we're going to put a timer into the coin, and we're going to set the timer to a very short amount, like half of a second, just to give it enough time to play that little animation that we're going to make later on. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to go actually back into my coin scene. And if I'm in my level, I could also press on this little scene icon next to our coin, and that jumps us back into our 3D coin scene, where we have just a root node and a mesh node and a collision shape node for the area root node. Under the root node of the coin, I'm going to select it and press plus. I'm going to add a new kind of a node. It's called a timer, and it's right here. And a timer is one of the most handy nodes in Godot, because all the time you want to be able to have a timer that will count down or repeat. And then once it gets down to 0 or to whatever number you want, you can tell it to do something. And so we're going to have it delete itself once the timer runs out. So I'm going to press create with timer selected, and I'm going to leave it named timer. And all I have to do now is, with it selected, is change its wait time. And I'm going to use the number 0.4, I think is the number that I use when I practice this video. So it's going to wait 0.4 seconds. And what is it going to do when it gets there? Well, we're going to go back to our coins code, and we're going to deal with that. So we're going to go back to our level, and we're going to make our coin detect a collision with Steve. And you've seen this before with our enemy. In the case of our enemy, we had the enemy itself, which is an area, just like our coin. It's going to detect using its own event handler signal if a physics body, including kinetic body like our character, or a kinetic body like our character, enters it. So I'm going to select my coin, and I'm going to go up to the node tab on the top right. And there is, under the area's abilities, or its common events, there is one that we've seen before. It's called body entered, and this will emit a signal to be handled by some code when a physics body enters the area of this area. So I'm going to double click on body entered, and when the body is entered of the coin, I'm going to have it run a function called onCoinBodyEntered, that's the default, on itself. So I'm going to click on the word coin here in the connect to node list of nodes in our scene, and I'm just going to press connect. So click on that, confirm that it's named this, and then press connect. And once it does that, I can look at my coin's code, and there's a new function here called onCoinBodyEntered, which will run when the coin is hit. Now, we need to make sure that it's the right physics body by looking at this body's name. So I'm going to write an if statement on line 10. I'm going to say if body.name space equals, because equals checks for equality, and I'm going to put in quotes Steve. You've seen this in the last video for enemies. So if the body's name is Steve, that means it's actually Steve that's hitting us, or this coin. And if that's the case, I'm just going to have it print to the screen. This is how you test code. You can do simple prints. And I'm going to say collect. And let's see if this actually works. So I'm going to press the play scene button. Make sure that your print line is indented with a tab. Otherwise, the if statement will not work and you'll get an error. So let's play this scene. And okay, we've got our coin rotating there. And if I go ahead and touch it, you can see on our output window on the bottom that it put collect twice. So that means it's working. If I press the stop button, what we want to do though is actually access our timer instead of pressing or printing collect on the screen. There's one little thing I need to change though. If I go into my coin scene, if I go over here to the tab or just on my level click on the little scene icon, we can't actually access our script from here, and that's a problem because we don't actually want to put on line 11 delete myself quite yet. We want to say, hey timer, start your timer, and that can't really work until the coin knows about its own code. So I'm going to select in my coin scene the root node. I'm going to go over to the inspector at the very bottom. Instead of pressing this little script, add script button, you can actually attach an existing script to any node that you want. And so under script, I'm going to click on the little arrow and say load. And I'm going to go into my scripts folder and I'm going to add the coin.gd. I'll press open. So now this coin, the root node of this coin scene, has a little script file that's the same as the script file that's on in my level, that's on the actual coin. And in fact, this root node is the same node as the basis or the root of the coin that we're seeing. So really these two files are the same thing and they're really in the same spot. I really wish that if you put a script on a node that's an instance, that it propagated back into the root node of the scene, but it doesn't. So the reason why we're going to want to do this is because our timer is going to need to be handled as well. But before we do that, I'm going to say if I'm hit by Steve, I'm going to need to access this coin's child named timer. And the way I can do that in my script is by putting a $sign. This is how you can actually point to a node in your game. And I'm going to say timer with a capital T. Now, when you use a $sign, you have to type out exactly the name of the node as you see it. But using this $sign just as I have it, you can only access a child node from the node that you're putting this script on. So it can only access these three nodes, not something higher up on the level of our game, unless you know how to do that. And you can, by the way, do that. So I'm going to say timer dot start. And start is a function that needs round brackets to call it, but you don't need to put any parameters in that function. So when Steve hits us, our timer is going to start. And as we know, if I click on my timer and go to the inspector, the timer is only 0.4 seconds. So it's going to end really quick. So what is the timer going to do once it runs out? Well, let's handle that. I'm going to select my timer and then go over to the node tab next to the inspector, and there is a common event that has a signal associated with it called timeout. So if I double click on that, and this is why we need to add the coin script into the actual coin scene onto the root node called coin, so that I can select my node, my coin node, and I can add a handler function for the signal of the timer onto my coin. You can't add a handler for a signal onto a node that you can't see in the scene that you're currently on, at least not easily. Hopefully that makes sense. That's a mouthful. So I'm going to select my coin, and this is called, or it's going to make a function called onTimerTimeout. Good enough. Let's press connect with coin selected. So now my timer, if I go and look at its timeout signal, it goes to a function called onTimerTimeout, which we know is on the coin script. And if I look at the coin script, there's the timer. What do we want to have this coin do if the timer runs out? Well, that's where this code goes on line 15. We want to have this coin, which is this script. This is the coin script, not the timer script. It's this file right here. We want to have it delete itself. How do you do that? Well, there's a function for it. It's called Q-U-E-U-E underscore free right there. So if I click on that or double click on it, that's all you need. And QFree will delete the coin once the timer times out after 0.4 seconds. Let's go ahead and try that out. I'm going to do a quick Control S to save, and I'll play my level scene, and we'll see if it works. Okay, so here we are. I'm just going to wait for my enemy to get out of the way, and I can roll around, of course, but I can collect the coin, and the coin took a little half second or 0.4 seconds, and then it disappeared. But of course it didn't count up because that's what we're about to do. I'm just going to replay that, and hopefully you can notice that when I go and touch the coin in a moment that it doesn't delete itself right away. It took an extra little half second before it deleted itself, and that's exactly what we want to add in animation during that little delay time. Okay, let's go ahead and add counting to our heads up display. So I'm going to close my game window and go back to my level and the 3D view, and I'm going to select my control node to jump back over to 2D view, and I'm going to select the control node itself, I believe. Oh, no, I think I'm going to use the actual label that has a Q in it right now. That'll make things easier. So this label has a terrible name. I'm going to double click on it to name it counter with a capital C. That might be important later. And I'm going to add a script file onto this label. So I'll select it, press the little add script button. I want to make sure that I'm saving the script file called counter into my scripts folder. So I'm going to go there, and it'll be called counter.gd, and I'll press open, and then gd script label and no comments and create. This code needs to have a variable to store how many coins you have collected, and at the offset of the game that number is 0. So right under the first line I'm going to press enter a few times, and I'm going to say var coins equals 0. And when the game is ready, or when this node is ready, I want to take this number and I want to put it into the label's text. So I'm going to change this word pass. That's a little temporary code. I'm going to say text space equals space coins. And that's probably going to give us an error, but let's go ahead and try it out. Let's go and press the play scene button. And we got an error. It says at the bottom under our debugger, error setting property text with value type of int. Essentially, this number is a data type in programming called an integer or an int, which is a whole number. And this text field, this text property, actually will access the property of the label's text. If I click on my counter and go to the inspector, you can see there's a text property right there. But on the counter's code, we're telling it to accept an integer using the assignment operator, the equal sign. It doesn't like that. So what we have to do is convert a integer into a string, because text variables and data in programming is called a string. So I believe I can just use a string method. So string with a capital S, and then I can put an integer inside its round brackets. This is, I think, good code. So let's go ahead and try that out. I'll press stop, that's important to do, and then press play scene. And as you can see now, we have a 0 up here in our coin counter, which is perfect. Let's go ahead and close this scene, because somehow now we have to get it so that when the coin is collected, so I'm going to go look at my coins script, so this little script icon right there, I have to somehow get from this somewhere where if our coin is colliding with Steve, either here on line 11 essentially, or yeah, right here, I need to put a message or a signal that sends a message to our counter to count up 1. How do we do that? Or I don't have to put it right there. I might actually want to put it, depending on what you want. If you want the coin to count up as soon as it touches Steve, or if you want it to wait until after the timer times out, right before it deletes itself, which is what I did, you could put that same line of code right up here on line 15 before it deletes itself. We have to create a custom signal, because if I select my coin and then go up to the node tab and under signals, these are signals that are built into Godot, and the different types of nodes have different common events associated with them. But you can make your own signals too. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a custom signal that we're going to broadcast to the counter. And that signal will say, hey, take that variable and count up by 1 and update the actual display of that number in the labels text. So I'm going to select my coin and go to my coin's code. And I'm going to create a new signal, just like a variable, up in the top of my code, right below the top line that starts with extends. So I'm going to write signal space coin collected. Okay, that's how you make a signal. And now if I actually click on my coin over in the scene dock and look, we have a coin collected signal over here. But this signal doesn't know when to emit itself. These built-in signals have certain events that trigger them. They are event handlers, but what is the event for coin collected? We have to tell it when to emit, and then we can use this interface up here to actually tell it where to connect to. So I'm going to go back to my script on my coin, and we're going to decide to emit a signal either, again, when Steve touches this coin, so I can put this line of code on line 13 right there, or I'm going to put it on line 17 because I want to emit once the timer has timed out. I'm going to say emit. This is a method or a function built in. It's called emit underscore signal. And so I can just click on it, double click on it to add it. And the signal, we just have to put in coin collected in double quotes. So I'm going to go into emit signal, type my double quotes, and type coin collected, and it knows what we mean because it knows for the signals or what signals I've defined in this code. So there we go. That code should work, except that it's going to emit this signal, but nothing is handling this signal yet. In other words, if I go back to my 3D scene and then click on my coin, this signal isn't going anywhere. There's no code that's running when it emits. So I'm going to double click on it in this node tab, and I'm going to connect it up to my counter's code. And my counter code is going to have a new method on it, or a function called onCoin collected. Sure, that makes sense. I'm going to actually delete the first coin or the second word coin, just so it's not redundant. So I'll get rid of that. On coin underscore collected. Yes, you can edit that name. So it's on the counter, and I'm going to press connect. And there we have it. On the counter's code, we have this new method called onCoin collected. Well, what do I want to do here? If a coin is collected, I want to take coins and add 1 to it and then update the code on my screen. So I'm going to change this word pass or line pass with coins equals coins plus 1. That's how you can add 1 to itself. You're saying, hey, make coins equal to itself plus 1. That's how you count up in programming. It's a little weird, but it kind of makes sense once you think about it. And we're going to say, hey, put the text on the screen and make it coins. Now I could copy this line of code, but I think I can just call the ready function again. And as long as we don't have anything else in here, and we don't, that hopefully will work. I haven't actually tried it that way before. Let's go ahead and press play scene. And we've got our game, and I'm just going to roll around a little bit, waiting for the enemy to go away. And when I collect my coin, aha, it disappeared, and we get a count of 1. So we are almost there. We need to add an animation, and we need to set it up so that we can make duplicate coins and move them around and count up until a certain number and go to you win screen. So we've got a little bit more to do still. Let's go ahead and close it, but now we know counting works the way we want. So next up is animation and making the coin do a little bounce. Let's go ahead and go back to our coin scene and look at it in the 3D view. Our coin scene has a root node. It's an area, of course. We have a mesh, of course, a collision shape, of course, and a timer, of course. And we want to add animation into this scene. So I'm going to go ahead and select my root node and press the plus. And I'm going to add the same thing that node that we added to our enemy in the last video, the animation player. But this time every coin's going to have the same animation, which is why we can add it inside of the original scene, and it'll get propagated out into all the instances of my coin that I create. So animation player and create, and so now it's here. I'm not going to change its name, and you'll see why a little bit later. But with the animation player selected, I get my animation panel at the bottom. And let's go ahead and click on animation and say new. And I'm going to call this bounce. All lowercase. That comes in later, so name it something that's easy to type, and I'll press OK. Now this animation is going to be very quick. It's only going to be 0.5 seconds. So I can change that value. I believe it's right here, 0.5. No, that's where I currently am. It's right up here, this number, it's 0.5. That's the duration number. And so let's go ahead and animate. So I'm going to select my coin, and I'm going to go to the inspector where, because it has a child that's an animation player, we now have all these keys, and we're going to animate the transform. We don't need to rotate this time because it's already rotating in the game. So I'm just going to animate its translation. So I'm going to press the key next to translation. And I'm going to press cancel. We're at frame 0 right now. There is a step of 10 little steps or frames that I can make per second, and only 5 for half of a second. So at the very first frame, at frame 0, I can type that in manually. I'm going to press the little key button. And do I want to create a new track for translation and insert a key? Yes, I do. And so now we've got a keyframe there. I'm going to go to frame 0.3, and I'm going to move it up. And this is where we might have to guess and check later, but I'm going to press now the key next to translation to insert a keyframe right there. And then it should drop a little bit. So at 0.5, the end of our animation, it's going to go back down a little bit again. And I'll press the key button. So now we've got a keyframe at 0, a keyframe at 1.12, and a keyframe at 0.775. That's it. This animation is called bounce because that's what we named it as. We're going to have to refer to that later because this animation is not going to autoplay and it's not going to loop. It's just going to play once. And once it finishes, it should be deleted anyway because the coin's going to get deleted anyways. So let's go ahead and press Control S to save. And let's go back to our level and look at the coin script. By the way, inside of the coin scene, this little button for the script goes to the exact same code file as if I were to click on the script right here next to coin in my level. It's the same code file. If you edit one, it edits it in both places. So just in case you're worried about that, it's the same thing. Going to say instead of, or actually in addition to timer.start, when we hit Steve, we not only want to have the timer start counting down, we want to play that animation. So I'm going to add that in first. I'm going to press enter right there, and I'm going to say $ animation player, because $ is how you access a child node, or at least any node in the tree, but it only gives you child nodes of the object that you're currently on, which this code is on the coin. So animation player, I'll press enter, dot, and this is where we can get to methods that are built into the animation player. One of those methods is called play. And all I have to do now is put in double quotes the name of the animation, bounce, and that's what we want to play. Okay, so when a coin detects that a physics body is entering it. It checks to see, hey, is the body's name Steve? And if it is, it's going to play the bounce animation, and it's going to play the timer, or start the timer. And then when the timer runs out, it's going to emit a signal, the custom signal, that goes to the counter, and it's going to also delete itself. So that should work. Let's go ahead and try this out. We are going to have a problem, I believe, but let's see what happens. Okay, so there's our scene, and I can move around, and I'm just going to wait for the enemy to go away. And I collected the coin, but if you noticed, when the coin played its animation, it went back to over here, and then played the animation and disappeared, and the coin counter worked, of course. But let's just try that again. I'm going to close it and play the scene again. And let's watch that again very carefully. I'm going to go past the coin, and it'll jump to over here, and it'll play the animation in the wrong spot. So we're going to fix that. There's a reason why that's happening. Yeah, hopefully you saw it there. Okay, the reason why that's happening is because we created keyframes of the coin telling it to be in a certain location or translation, and when we do that, when I go into the coin scene and create those animation player keyframes, we're telling it to be at that certain location, which on the X and Z axes is 0, 0, the middle of our world. So that's what's happening. When we play the animation of our coin, it says to itself, hey, I should be over here at 0, 0, 0, where this ball is, and it plays there. So how can we get around this? It's using global coordinates. Well, what we can do is we can trick it by making a little holder for each coin. This is kind of a little hack. I'm going to select my coin node. That's the folder for all my coins. And I'm going to press the plus, and I'm going to make a new spatial node. It needs to be a spatial type. And I'll double click. So now I've got this spatial, and I'm going to call this coin holder 1. And I'll press enter, and I'm going to drag coin onto that to make it a child of coin holder 1. But coin holder 1 is at 0, 0, 0. If I select it and go to its transform properties, it's at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to move coin holder 1 instead of the actual coin when I position all the coins around the map. So I need to reset the coin position. So it's at 0, 0, 0 in relation to, or in reference to, its parent, which is also at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to select my coin, go to its transform properties, set it to 0, 0, and 0. And now if I grab coin holder 1 and move it up and move it over, and so I haven't actually moved the coin still thinks it's at 0, 0, 0 because it's in relation to its parent. And now if I select coin holder 1, you can see its translation is wherever I put it. Let's move it a little bit. Maybe let's move it, I don't know, over here. Okay, just so we know that it's definitely not on the same axis at all. And if I go ahead and play this scene, and so let's see if I can get past the enemy and collect my coin. Aha, it worked. It stayed in the same spot. It went up, and it didn't jump back to 0, 0, 0. That's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and finish this project. We're missing one major thing though. We need a U windscreen. So on the count of 3, I'm going to snap my fingers and I'm going to fast forward in time, and I'm going to have the most beautiful U windscreen you've ever seen. 3, 2, 1. Aha, there it is. Okay, Godot is so easy, isn't it? In reality, if you want to refresh yourself on how to make a menu like this with a button and text and fonts, I'll put a link to that video in this mini-series on the screen right now. But in reality, this is almost an exact duplicate of my game over screen, which I basically duplicated. In fact, I did duplicate it down here. I took the game over, right-clicked, and said duplicate, and then I just edited the colors and the text and the different colors for the button and the background color. So there you have it. How do I get there? How do I win the game right now? I can't even get to this screen. Well, in my game, if I go to level and then go to my counter, I want to look at its code, and it'll be the thing that sends me to the you win screen. So the only time that I should be able to even check to see, or need to check to see if I win the game, is right as I collect a coin. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to, and what I could do here is I could just say, hey, if coins is equal to 10, then go to the switch scenes and go to the you win screen. But I'm going to be a little bit smarter than that because there's often a little bit of a delay. So I'm going to add to my counter its own timer. So with my counter selected, I'm going to press the plus button. I'm going to double click on timer. My timer's properties, I'm going to set its wait time to a second. Sure, that's fine with me. When my timer runs out, so I'm going to select my timer, go to the node signals dock and double click on timeout. And when this timer times out, I want it to run a function or a method on the counter that says that's called on timer timeout, and press connect. So now this timer is connected to a function on its parent, the counter. So if I go to the counter's code, it's got this function called on timer timeout, but I actually need to make the timer actually start counting. So when a coin gets collected, I'm going to do a couple of things. First, we need to see if we've collected enough coins. So I'm going to say if coins is equal to, or double equal sign, 10, we'll do 10 coins. Actually, for this game, we'll do 5 for the sake of the length of this video. If coins is equal to 5, I want to say dollar time dot, and what's it called? It's called start. And once it starts, it will eventually run out after 1 second. And once it runs out, it will run this function. And when it runs this function, we should change our scene. And the way you do that is you type get underscore tree, 2 round brackets, because it's a method call, dot change underscore scene, not the one with 2 in it, but just change scene. And now we can go to our res folder and the you win. So our scene name is called uwin.tscn, but we're going to point to it with res : uwin. So I'll copy that and I'll paste it into double quotes right there. And that should be it. So just to recap that last little part, when our coin collects or is collected, it's going to make the coin counter equal to itself plus 1. It's going to run the ready function, which makes the text on the screen equal to the variable number. And then it's going to check to see, hey, if our coin is collected, maybe that's all the coins and I'm done. So it checks to see, hey, if coins is equal to 5, then start our timer, which is only ever going to run if this line 12 is true, if we've collected 5 coins. If it is true, if we've collected 5 coins, it's going to run the timer. And once that timer runs out, it will change the scene to you win. That whole thing just lets us do a little bit of a delay. Otherwise, you could just put this line of code, Control-C, right there, Control-V. But I thought a timer would be better. And the timer also needs to have this method made, which is this one right here. Okay, so hopefully this will work. Let's go ahead and do a Control-S and play the scene. And let's just make sure it all works. And I need to duplicate my coin in the coin holder 5 times. But let's just make sure this last little bit works before we duplicate the coins. So that worked. I got stuck on the wall there, not the coin. That frightened me for a sec. Let's go ahead now and take our coin holder and duplicate it. So I can right click on it and duplicate. I've got coin holder 2. That's convenient. Maybe I'll put one up here. Remember, I'm not duplicating the coin, I'm duplicating the coin holder because we're moving the whole coins world so the animation will play in the right spot. Let's duplicate that again. Right click, duplicate, and let's put that one. Oh, I'm making it easy for myself. Right click, duplicate, and let's put that one right here, and right click, duplicate, and let's move this one. Oh, I don't know. Let's put it up here. I like it. Okay, super easy. Let's go ahead and play this game. In fact, before we do that, I can actually, to make this area a little bit less messy, I can actually just collapse the coins node like a folder, so I don't have to see all those coins. That's why we made that there. So let's press play scene, and let's go and see if we can win this game. I'm gonna roll around and collect my coins. I'm totally avoiding that enemy, and my coins are collecting just fine. And if I roll down to the last coin, aha, it did it. It got to 5, it waited a second, and then it went back to the you win, or went to the you win screen, and now I can click on play again. And now I can click on play, and as we know, it takes a few seconds to load our bigger level, but it does work. So that will be it for this video. Of course, if you like this video or if you learned something, go ahead and click on that like button below this video. It really helps me and my channel out. And if you want to see more videos like this one in Godot or Blender or technology, click on that subscribe button and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever I upload a new tutorial. Check out my Facebook page at facebook.com/borncg. On that page, I post previews and sneak peeks of what I'm working on next, and it's where I communicate with you the most, hopefully. But that will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. See you next one. Bye-bye.